With Tulio leaving Watermelon and the company having a strict no communication policy, years would go by without any news on the game's status. But we would eventually learn the Paprium project was not going smoothly, as Watermelon had taken on too many projects, overscoped them, and plans to release games with an add-on ship were not working out. This is the story of Watermelon and all its projects, where I ask a simple question: what happened to Paprium? With development being so closely tied to Fonzie, finding any information about the game's status without interviewing its central figure proved a difficult task. But despite having made several attempts across multiple email and forum accounts to contact him, he never got back to me. So I reached out to Luis Martins and Obi-Wan, one of the game's coders, as well as Jorge Candeias, hoping they could provide answers.
We asked the animators that were contracted by Watermelon to go over and do the animations that we put together in terms of ideas, and then they would go over and do their work, and some animators were really great, very talented, and they spot on matched the quality of the sprite work, and they were able to do amazing animations. Others, mostly and especially in the beginning of the project, not so much. And what I had to do is go over a lot of the frames that were created because, let's say, budget-wise, those animations were, decent. So what I did is I went over and I auto-corrected a lot of the character anatomy, the poses, the art style. So it still was a lot of work for me to go over a lot of those frames, but we ended up through the years making everything that we needed to do. Most assets are done. The game is practically completed in terms of assets. These past years, it's been a little bit more difficult having Fonzie's presence, both in the community and also with the team, right? Because sometimes I would ask for some updates, an animator would finish, because towards the past years, what was very important was to finish the animation sheets for the characters, because that was very, very important. So a lot of work and time was dedicated to that. At the same time, on Fonzie's side, I understood that programming was advancing and also background art was also advancing. After the trailer came out, a lot of people had interest in showcasing Paprium in events all over the world. I've received a lot of emails of people requesting for, can we show the game? We would have a stand, and then we would have like posters and banners and, sharing to everyone, the game with the Paprium build demo, with artwork. So this was always a bit like sketchy for me in terms of that. What I understood is that Fonzie wasn't so much so for a demo that would be out there, because he's probably maybe was afraid that that it would leak or something like that. So, or maybe he didn't have the means to have a team to go there. I don't know why these things didn't happen, but it's something that I was a little bit upset when a lot of these people put the effort and want to help. For myself, I was a little bit sad not to see the effort put from Watermelon's side. The last information I've got from him was this December 2017, and he asked me, "Hey Louis, can you come down to China to help me out finalize the game? Basically, anything that is gameplay, like the flow of the enemies, I'm assuming, testing, making sure that the game is fun, and etc., etc." But at that time, I couldn't go down to China for like 2 weeks, because I had other responsibilities here. So I don't know how he perceived the message, because after that, I got no reply back. The initial animations were actually contracted by a Chinese company. Funny enough, when they came back, I was like, uh-oh, this is really bad quality. Then, I worked with Fonzie trying to get the best quality as possible, but I do know that he spent quite some funding on contracting some of this company to do some work, and in the end, it was wasted money because the animations were just like really bad. There was a period where finding an animator was a little bit difficult for him.
What was wrong with the animations?
Literally, there was some copies of other games in there.
Oh, I remember that. people discovered the animations were lifted from other games, right?
Absolutely, and I was like, because I didn't notice it, Fonzie was in charge of releasing those images, and when I realized, I was like, whoa, this is really not good. So, I mean, this doesn't, we gotta get this, this is not good, so we gotta fix this. And yeah, of course, Fonzie agreed right away. It's impossible for us to have a game that, we want to make an original game, we want to make something that looks original. We don't want like copying something else. There was also the anatomy, the pixel art itself wasn't very high quality. The characters would have like smaller arms, like it was just very weird, smaller legs. Yeah, the anatomy was just really totally bad. And it was also very stiff. For Sega Genesis games, there, for a beat 'em up, there's so many frames you need. Like special moves in running and walking probably have some, they do have some more animation frames, but anything else in terms of action, kicking, punching, and flying kicks and all that, enemies punching and kicking, you tend to reduce it to just a very few frames, and that's fine because that's how it works, But the quality was bad. The color management into the sprite itself was bad, and then that's when we switched and we started to find other artists that were able to help us out.
Do you think it would be easy for someone to continue Fonzie's work on the game?
No. Oh, come on. I disassembled Pier Solar and this code is rubbish.
Would you say Fonzie is not a good coder?
Maybe it's not being a good programmer or not, but it's certainly convoluted. Obviously, I'm not able to say how the source of Pier Solar looks like, but other people are because they ported it after all. But what I can say is that the assembly generated from his C code is a total disaster. I'll also say one more thing. It's the same size as Sonic 1. Just the code for Pier Solar is the same size as Sonic 1. Half megabyte.
Fonzie, he called me and he would you like to make some things on a new project I have? And I said, yeah, for sure, please let me know. And he asked me to work on the graphic engine optimization. He told me he got this graphic engine. It ran quite cool, but not enough for him. He wanted it to run way better, and he thought that maybe I could make some improvements. He sent me a screen with, I guess it was 6 to 8 big sprites. Think of Streets of Rage 2. The goal of Fonzie and Paprium is to have those huge sprites and everything running at smooth 60 FPS. On the technical documents from the Sega Genesis, it is mentioned that you can't have more than, I guess it's 80 sprites without flickering. Here the goal was to have more than 80 sprites. So it's kind of, the magician work. Fonzie asked me, the point then wasn't give me 128 sprites on screen. The goal was make this as less consuming time as possible. In the very beginning, I guess we took, I would say 1/3 of a frame to display all the frames. 1/3, you could say, it gives you 2 remaining thirds of the frame to do all the other stuff. But there is a huge amount of things to do. Controls, IA, music, and so on and so on. So 1/3 for the frame, it was just too big. So I was very happy to dig deep inside the Genesis. At the end of the day, I got something like 43% of optimization. It means that instead of 1/3 of the frame being used on displaying sprites and so on, it was only 2/3 of a third.
So, do you believe Paprium can push these large sprites at 60 frames per second as intended after implementing your optimizations?
The only thing I got was just an empty screen with 6 or 8 sprites on them, each and one smoothly animated and each and one scrolling independently. When Fonzie gave me this and asked me, please optimize this, we weren't very far from something totally smooth and without flickering and friendly running at 60 FPS. But, Fonzie, the guy is pretty ambitious, and he wanted to make absolutely sure that all right, we are going to run at 60 FPS, and yes, goddamn, we're going to push the Genesis to the end. I think that without my optimization, you could have a lot of sprites and each and everything running at 60 FPS smoothly, no problem. But thanks to the optimization I put on the project, I think that we are going to have each and everything running smoothly, and we are damn sure that there won't be any slowdown or something. And moreover, I'm pretty damn sure that Fonzie may have used those gained time to add some things from there to there.
What about the coprocessor? Can you share any additional information on it?
Yes, as far as I was involved, yes, there wasn't any plan to use the Datenmeister for something other than the music and sound effects. Regarding the graphics, the graphics, as far as I was involved, were only to be handled by the 68K and the VDP. The VDP is quite a good coprocessor in the Genesis, actually.
I was told that Pier Solar's code was very messy. Do you feel the same applies to Paprium?
There's this, you know what they say, code is like fart. You can only handle, suffer your own code. For the code of anybody else, any code, you would say, oh, well, that's not my code, so it's rubbish. And that's exactly the point for me. You give me the best code from, Linux kernel, Windows, Mac OS X, you name it, and you tell me, oh, what do you think of this code? And I will say, oh, wow, that's rubbish. I can do this much better. But the point is, maybe I can write this much better, but give this code, give the code to anybody else, and they will say, oh my, this code stinks. Who in his damn mind would write something like this? We coder are a bit of peculiar, grumpy, and especially in the demo scene, and especially on some stuff so specialized, I would say.
On one of the official Paprium screenshots shared by Watermelon, we can make out inconsistent transparency effects, which should not be possible on the Mega Drive. This conclusion spread like wildfire among the various Paprium and Sega Genesis communities. I hope to discover if any development had been done on transparency effects for the game.
Well, transparency is virtually impossible on the Mega Drive. The only way you can achieve transparency is by having kind of interleave lines, dithering patterns and stuff. That only works if you're using a CRT television, because the PAL actually even not the PAL signal is very clean. The NTSC signal has some luminance leaks, and because of that the image blurs a little bit, and you get, like, if you have a line and another line on the foreground and the background is in between, those lines blur and you get transparency, and that's very easy to visualize on Sonic 2 waterfalls. Like, you see a bunch of lines like this, but I know you can do some tricks with shadow highlighting to give the impression of transparency. But so that's one thing. If you see any transparency in anything that looks like it's pixel perfect, that's a big red flag. That said, I don't want to say like make allegations or anything, but Fonzie is really, really skilled with his Photoshop or PaintShop Pro or whatever tool that he uses. He is a master on those graphic tools. I would be skeptical to believe in anything that looks pixel perfect and that looks like it was, even if it's animated. I mean, the only way at this point that I will believe, because we don't have any evidence that everyone ever played the game for real. I would only believe something that you see someone plugging the cartridge, turning on the TV, and that thing coming back on with a very, like, just a camera, very easy angle, nothing edited, nothing like, no cuts or anything.
it's not something I've worked on. I can recognize some sprites I worked on, the boxer and maybe the girl in the elevator. But you're talking about the transparency of the glass. I wouldn't be able to tell. I won't be able to say whether it's possible or not. I would say that even if the Genesis didn't have true transparency effect, contrary to the Super NES, there is something overshadow, I guess, of highlight. I guess it's the thing. So regarding this peak in the elevator, I would say definitely it's not a transparency as its effect. I will say that they could be used using highlight. I can't remember for the sake of me the real name of. I guess it's highlight or something like this. So this could be achieved using highlight, but since it's not something I've worked on, I couldn't say for sure. Well, it is a Genin screenshot or it was edited. I couldn't really say.
It seemed as though Fonzie was a central figure in the delays, lack of communication, and friction within Watermelon. With that in mind, I asked everyone, what was it like working with Fonzie?
I would defend that until the end of my days. He is very talented. He is a very, very good graphic artist, and everything that he does really has a very unique character that I love. If you look at the Magical Game Factory, the page, you know how he layouts things, it's really cool. The problem is that he had difficulty sharing his vision and being able to coach people into his vision. Whenever a person's vision diverged from him, either that person was incompetent or that person was not good enough for the company. You know, I don't know what's the background he grew up in, but he was very authoritarian. I wouldn't say he was abusive, but he didn't have any filter, essentially. Whenever he's communicating with someone, if he thinks that the person was being an idiot, they will just say. And not everyone takes that very well. I mean, Watermelon, we had several members who suffer from depression, and sometimes words can hurt.
Talking to Fonzie was like a bipolar thing. 1 minute you would be speaking with him and he would be very nice and very friendly, relatively easy to work with and talk to. And then on the other hand, you'd have moments where he wouldn't respond to you and you'd have to really chase him. Like you'd have to constantly message him every day to get something. I mean, I did a lot of customer support. So a lot of the people who sent tickets, they got sent to me and they're asking a lot of questions. And I wouldn't be able to satisfy their answers in regards to Project Y Paprium. You know, I wouldn't be able to satisfy it, and it kind of made me feel like a dick. Fonzie is super talented. Don't get me wrong. He is probably one of the best in the whole Mega Drive scene. Fonzie is the fucking man. I don't know if I'm allowed to swear, but he has no managerial skills at all. No people skills at all.
Tully was a person that was in favor of communication and all this stuff, and Fonzie was like, yeah, useless, blah, nobody needs anything.
He wanted to control everything, and everything had to be his way. A very strange thing. He'd have these incredible mood swings. When he was in a good mood, he'd be receptive to your ideas, and you could have a good conversation going with him and everything. And then, boom, bizarro Fonzie would show up.
But not everyone shares a similarly bad experience with Fonzie.
I could see that perfectionism and other things from him, and sometimes we had little chats, and he was positive. I haven't had any bad experiences.
For me, it was a wonderful experience indeed to have worked on the Paprium project. It brought me a lot of things, some kind of knowledge, and it was really, 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 really interesting indeed. For Fonzie, I know I would say this. He is a kind of Steve Jobs. While it's easy to say, come on, the guy is not delivering, is not publishing, I would say walk 5 miles in the guy's boots and then tell me about this.
it was fine. I never had any problem with Fonzie concerning communication. It was fine. I met him several times, but I don't know the actual status of the game. Paprium. I don't know if, from what I understood, it's completely finished, but apparently it doesn't have the means to manufacture the game, so I don't know what's going on. I don't know what happened.
He was definitely a perfectionist, which was it made my job easier a little bit in some weird ways, because I always knew that what I was doing was pretty much exactly what he wanted, because we had hashed it back and forth so many times. I just stopped hearing back from him after a contract that we did, and he wanted to do another one, but unfortunately, this is really awkward. Basically, I did some work for him last year, and months later, the invoice was never filled, and I contacted him about it, but it was never resolved, and he stopped replying to emails about it, it's not that I sent a ton of emails, but I sent a couple. I sent a PayPal reminder or two. I'm conflicted because we had a pretty great working relationship for years, and this last job was so small.
But Soaps wasn't the only one who have payment issues with Fonzie. In fact, most people who were promised payment for their work were either only partially paid or not paid at all. The programmer behind Project N was another example of a team member who stopped receiving payments. But there were others.
I did get paid, and that did continue when 2 days left. Fonzie was paying me, but again, I had to chase him up more, like, hey, can you pay me for the month? And then he said, oh, okay. Sometimes he'd be like, sure. Boom, done. He paid me for that month. And I'd have to kind of, every month say, hey, my money. At that point in time, I needed the money. I mean, I know it wasn't that much, but I needed that money because I moved to a new country, and it's hard. I have rent and stuff. So it's eventually at one point I sent him a message and he didn't respond to me. He never got back to me, and I sent him again. He didn't get back to me. He didn't pay me.
Were you ever promised payment for your work?
Of course.
And did you receive any payment?
Lol. No.
It's unknown whether Watermelon was running out of funds at this point. However, the studio contacted the developers behind 2 indie games for the Mega Drive with the purpose of having them published in a physical format. Those games were Sacred Line and Peppy Commando. I was able to contact Viteia, the developer behind Peppy Commando, and ask for his experience working with Watermelon. He had this to say.
When I finished developing Paprium Commando, I shared the ROM online for free. Sometime later, I was contacted by Fonzie, who was interested in publishing my game. Fonzie was very pleasant and professional throughout our partnership, quickly sending me test cartridges and being very communicative. The manufacturing process took roughly 10 months, though the biggest issue was a bug with the cartridges, which caused the game to crash and the console to reset. The Watermelon testing team and I spent a lot of energy trying to figure out what was causing this, and eventually Fonzie discovered an EEPROM capacitor had the wrong value set. Once this was fixed, everything proceeded accordingly.
Sasha Darko, the developer behind Sacred Line, shares a different story.
Tulio sent me a large part of the whole sum before leaving the company. He wasn't obliged to do that by the contract. I assume he did it because he knew there will be many problems with Gode staying as the president. At first, Gode sent 2 or 4 parts of the rest money. When he realized it's possible for him just to not pay anything to any developer, at the least the ones who are not living in France. When he realized it's just to not make any games while still receiving money, it's easy. There's no Watermelon anymore. It's like modern Atari. Same label but completely different everything. If there's any issue on Gode's side, he never admits it's his fault or something. He always comes up with some ridiculous lie. With the payments, he came up with the idea that there's an ultra expensive lawyer whom he desperately needs to contact every time when he sends the money. Because reasons. For fuck's sake. When he said it's actually me who owes him money because postal service lost some game copies. Fuck. He was obliged by the contract to provide an audio fix for the game. He never did. There is an issue with the game booting on TMSS systems. He said it's because of some guys on the factory. And what he checked everything. So fucking ridiculous, so childish. He was supposed to send Mel at least 1 game copy for his help with the game translation. He got the address, he sent nothing. When he was asked about that and told he hadn't sent anything because he doesn't have his phone, his mobile phone. And but he will send a huge box of copies to mail soon, very soon. Of course he never did. Lies, it's so he's fucking about. And he thinks of himself like he's a fucking king.
On the gaming website romgame.fr, we learned that Fonzie owes him over $3,000 in royalty sales from his game. Other Watermelon projects included a Paprium-themed arcade stick and manga, both of which were available for pre-order, but none of which have shipped yet. I contacted the artist behind the manga, Soaps, to hopefully gain further insight on the manga and other Watermelon projects. But due to the Watermelon NDA, no details about it can be shared. As we near the end of this documentary on Watermelon, there are a few notable events that are worth discussing. However, what little information I was able to find on them was mostly hearsay. The first took place in August 2016. It seems that during a trip, several of Watermelon's development kits for Paprium were reportedly lost in transit by Air France, and it's currently unknown if these were ever recovered. A user on Sega 16 who claimed to have connections with an Air France told users he tried to clear this issue, but no one at Air France knew what he was talking or were even aware of any dev kits being lost in transit. Though, without confirmation on either side, this can be considered as just hearsay. Additionally, in March 2017, an announcement was made that PayPal had frozen Watermelon's assets. This information was shared through an official announcement, which stated that production on the game would continue, but that Paprium would be delayed until early 2018, a deadline which was missed.
There were some issues that it seemed to have happened. Not very clear luggage about traveling and losing dev kits and all that, and even for myself it wasn't very clear because I didn't understand exactly the complete situation. After that came the PayPal issue, and then that was a little bit. That was another thing that I was like, okay, it's starting to be quite difficult to make a game like this. From what I was told, is that basically PayPal thought it was a lot of there was quite a good few number of pre-orders, so that was successful. I think Europe sold out, but anyways, there was a lot of pre-orders that it was very successful, and there was a lot of funding that went into the PayPal account of Watermelon. So I'm assuming that PayPal realized that it was a lot of funding that was coming in, so they freezed it of some kind. I don't know. I know some people out there understand this better than I do, but yeah, I was basically told that it was frozen and they couldn't access the funding. So not being able to access the funding was a major issue.
It's possible the PayPal issues are related to several team members not receiving payment for their services. However, the PayPal issues took place in 2017, and by then, most team members had already quit Watermelon or were already complaining from lack of payment. Additionally, it seems unlikely PayPal would freeze Watermelon's assets due to Paprium's high pre-order amount, especially considering users could make purchases on the Watermelon website from 2012 onwards for products like Pier Solar reprints, Pier Solar HD, Sacred Line, Peppy Commando, and Gems. But if PayPal did freeze Watermelon's funds, it doesn't seem likely that they would have remained in this state for long, as PayPal can only withhold funds for a maximum of 180 days. By the end of 2018, Watermelon had essentially been reduced to just Fonzie and had no physical offices anymore, though it's unclear when the offices were closed. Regardless, it seemed increasingly unlikely that the game would ever be released. Then, on October 8, 2018, Watermelon shocked everyone by announcing a Paprium launch party to coincide with the Mega Drive's 30th anniversary. The announcement also promised that everyone would receive the final game around that time, indicating that a second email would be sent shortly so that everyone who pre-ordered the game could confirm their shipping addresses. Fonzie had exclusively booked the nightclub in Paris just for the event. It was a lavish affair with entertainers, DJs, arcade machines decked in Paprium vinyls. It's clear no expense was spared for this event. And so, on October 27, 2018, gamers would finally be able to see Paprium running on original Sega hardware. But it soon became clear the game was far from finished. The backgrounds, character art and animations all seemed to be completed and were impressive for the system it was running on. Some even commented on how the game looked like it had achieved a near Neo Geo graphical standard. But there were no enemies to be seen throughout the gameplay demonstration. Graphical glitches would often crop up, and the game even crashed several times. Moreover, there was absolutely no music or sound effects, leaving many to assume the coprocessor issues have yet to be resolved. Fonzie would often try to hide these imperfections by placing his hand over whatever was going wrong or by quickly resetting the machine. But it was clear that at best, Paprium was still in alpha stages, and far from being completed. Following the launch party, Watermelon went silent yet again. There have been no updates on the game's new launch date, or when we could finally expect Paprium to be released, and the promised follow-up email never came. Camille, the new Watermelon project manager, would answer the occasional Facebook comment, but even this would soon stop. According to Sasha Darko, she was owed months of payment by Fonzie, and eventually grew frustrated and left the studio. What little faith gamers had in the project was now gone, and fans around the world had no issue in voicing their disappointment on the Watermelon website, Facebook, and various gaming forums. Even some media outlets had picked up on this. To further compound on the issue, Watermelon deactivated the refund feature on their website, and also deactivated the support email, ensuring no one would be able to get their money back from their pre-orders. And with this, we have now caught up to the present. No further details about Paprium or its projects are known, and it seems likely that this will be the greatest game never launched for the Mega Drive. What originally began as a fan project helmed by friends grew into a promising young company, sparking interest in a long-dead console and proving there was a market for new games on aging hardware. The commercial success of Pier Solar and the interest in Paprium inspired other developers to create their own Mega Drive or Genesis games, breathing new life onto the console with recently released games like Tanglewood and Coffee Crisis, or upcoming titles like Xeno Crisis, FX Unit Yuki, and Kung Fu UFO. We also have companies like Pico Interactive, who now acquire the rights to several Mega Drive and Genesis games, both new and old, translate them into English, and release them in cartridge format. Indeed, a new market has been created. One which isn't restricted to just the Sega Genesis, as we now have several new games being released for aging hardware, including the NES, SNES, and PC Engine. But Watermelon's success was not meant to last. A straining partnership ended a long-standing friendship between its founders. A lack of communication with fans, the media, or even among team members affected consumer confidence, made even worse by the fact payments were no longer being issued to those working on the games. Projects were overscoped, deadlines too ambitious, and the budgets could not withstand the strained development cycles, nor other frivolous costs. Missed promises and hurdles which strained credibility damaged the company's reputation, as did reports that the team leader Fonzie was difficult to work with. Despite this, Watermelon's mark on the gaming world was positive, not just with the release of Pier Solar and Pier Solar HD, but also due to the influence it had in inspiring others to create their own passion projects for their childhood console. Even its own former members have moved on to other similar projects. Tulio, the studio's co-founder, created a new company, 2Dream, and went on to develop and publish Ghostblade HD, a shmup for the Sega Dreamcast with ports to the PC and PS4. Zeve is currently working on his own Mega Drive game, titled The Viking and the Ninja, while Luis Martins and Arman helped with the creation of the previously mentioned Tanglewood. Paprium may never become the ultimate beat-em-up experience it promised us, but at least we'll always have Streets of Rage 2.